Hey everyone, before we settle in, I want you to take a slow breath and let the day soften a little. Tonight's episode is gentle, unhurried, and if you enjoy this kind of calm storytelling, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely feels right to you. And if you like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see how many different corners of the world gather here for these quiet, late-night journeys. Now, dim the lights a bit, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, and let your space ease into stillness. When you're ready, just let the story drift into your mind. Imagine yourself in ancient Rome, long before the city became a symbol of marble glory and imperial power. Rome, in its quiet moments, was a living creature of sound, movement, and warm morning light. As the first sliver of dawn touched the rooftops, the city breathed awake. Slowly, then all at once. The day began not with alarms or clocks, but with the natural rhythm of the city itself. You were here before you saw it. The distant rumble of wooden carts rolling over stone streets, pulled by oxen with slow, patient steps. Vendors calling softly as they prepared their stalls. Somewhere far off, a temple bell sounded, a deep, steady note that drifted across the rooftops like a reminder that another day had begun under the eyes of the gods. Inside the homes of ordinary Romans, mornings were humble and familiar. Most people slept on simple beds, wooden frames with rope lattices, covered with straw mattresses or stuffed wool. Wealthier families had softer bedding, but the majority lived in insulated, tall apartment-like buildings where space was tight and comfort depended on luck and income. Many families shared rooms. Parents and children often slept close together, sometimes in the same small space, sometimes divided by a curtain or a wooden partition. Privacy, as we think of it today, wasn't really part of Roman life. But even in these crowded rooms, sleep had its own peaceful rhythm. Roman nights were darker and quieter than ours. No streetlights, no engines, only the hush of wind and the faint murmur of late-night wanderers returning home. When dawn came, most households woke quickly. A Roman morning wasn't rushed, but it was purposeful. People rose with the sun, stretching their arms as a faint glow slipped through small windows or open doorways. Children stirred, rubbing their eyes, while the smell of yesterday's embers lingered faintly in the room. Before anything else, people performed small rituals of cleanliness, the kind that grounded them for the day ahead. There were no showers or taps, but Romans used what they had with quiet efficiency. A bowl of water, kept near the entrance or on a small table, was used to splash the face, rinse the hands, and wipe the sleep's dust from the eyes. It was refreshing and symbolic, washing off the heaviness of the night, preparing the body and mind for the new day. Some used a bit of olive oil to soothe their skin, especially in the drier seasons. A few drops rubbed on the arms or face helped keep the skin soft and protect it from the harsh Roman sun. Grooming was simple but thoughtful. Men might quickly comb their hair with bronze or wooden combs. Women would smooth their hair or braid it loosely before preparing it properly later in the day. These small actions weren't about vanity. They were about feeling ready, grounded, and awake. As the light grew stronger, households came alive with movement. Children fetched water from nearby fountains, carrying clay jugs carefully through the early morning streets. Women prepared small meals, often bread dipped in wine, olives, or leftover porridge from the night before. Men dressed for work, fastening simple tunics at the shoulder, tying belts around their waists, adjusting their sandals before stepping out into the city's energy. Outside, Rome itself was stirring like a great beast stretching after sleep. The streets slowly filled with color and sound. Bakers opened their shops, sliding warm loaves from their ovens. You could almost smell it, that blend of yeast, smoke, and comforting warmth drifting through the alleys. In the early hours, the marketplace, the bustling forum, began to awaken. Stalls unfolded like petals under the rising sun. Vendors arranged baskets of fruit, heaps of vegetables, pots of honey, stacks of fish brought in from the Tiber River. The sound of conversation grew from whispers to lively chatter. Hammers rang as craftsmen opened their workshops. Shoppers moved slowly at first, wrapped in light morning cloaks, greeting neighbors and friends as they passed. Even though mornings were busy, they carried a calm that disappeared later in the day. The air was cooler, the crowd gentle. Sunrise in Rome was a moment before the heat and chaos took over. A peaceful pause where the city felt almost tender. For some, the morning included a visit to a nearby shrine, a small offering, a pinch of incense, a whispered prayer, a brief moment of silence was enough. Romans believed that starting the day with a little gratitude kept fortune in balance. You didn't have to be deeply religious to appreciate the quiet comfort of these small rituals. As more sunlight touched the rooftops, shadows stretched across the narrow streets, and the world brightened with soft golden hues. The city's fountains sparkled, sending fresh water into basins where residents gathered to fill their jugs or splash their faces again. Public fountains were meeting points, places where neighbors exchanged stories, shared news, or simply greeted each other with gentle nods. For many Romans, morning meant work, long hours as builders, merchants, scribes, bakers, soldiers, or craftsmen. But before their tasks truly began, they enjoyed this first gentle chapter of the day, when the sun was kind and the noise still soft. In wealthier homes, mornings were quieter but just as ritualistic. Servants prepared water for washing, lit lamps if rooms were dim, and helped arrange clothing. Wealthy women used small mirrors of polished bronze to adjust their hair, applying oils gently to keep it smooth. Men might review letters or talk briefly with household staff about the day's chores, all while enjoying the soft calm before stepping outside into the city's rhythm. Across Rome, from grand villas to humble insular rooms, mornings were the great equalizer. Everyone woke under the same sky, hearing the same carts, smelling the same bread warming in the ovens. And as the sun rose higher, the true pace of Rome began. Streets filled quickly, voices grew louder, shops opened fully, stray dogs wandered in search of scraps, and the great city, ancient and alive, stepped confidently into another day. This is a world we're stepping into, slowly, gently, as we begin our journey through ancient Rome, a place where mornings were simple, grounding, and quietly beautiful. A place where life unfolded not in grand gestures, but in small, human routines. And as the market doors opened wide and sunlight washed over the forum, the Romans, one by one, walked into the heart of their day. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost step through the doorway of an ancient Roman home. Not the grand marble halls you see in movies, but the real homes where ordinary people lived, worked, cooked, prayed, and rested. Each home, whether tiny and crowded or wide and elegant, carried its own quiet rhythm, its own warmth, its own scent of oil, clay, and daily life. To understand how the Romans lived, we first need to picture the two main kinds of homes, the insula and the domus. These two buildings stood side by side in the same city, often just a street apart, yet they belonged to very different worlds. Insulae, Rome's apartment buildings. Most Romans lived in insulae, tall, narrow apartment blocks made of brick, wood, and plaster. Some stretched up to 5 or 6 stories high, leaning slightly like tired giants watching over the streets. The higher you lived, the cheaper it was, because water had to be carried upstairs by hand, and the rooms became smaller and darker with each floor. Walking into an insula was like stepping into a small maze. You'd find narrow staircases, wooden walkways, and tiny doors leading into family rooms that served many purposes at once. A single space could be a bedroom at night, a dining area at noon, and a workshop in the afternoon. Children played on the floor, while parents cooked or mended clothing. People lived close enough to hear each other breathe, argue, laugh, and tell stories. Privacy was a luxury, and most didn't expect it. The air carried mixed scents. Bread from the shop downstairs, a neighbor's stew, warm olive oil, and sometimes a faint smokiness of small lamps flickering through the evening. Although simple, these homes held the heartbeat of Rome. Ordinary people slept, dreamed, and whispered their hopes inside these walls. Domus, homes of the wealthy. In contrast, a wealthy Roman's home, the domus, felt like a different universe entirely. Stepping through its entrance was like entering a cool, shaded sanctuary away from the busy streets. A domus was usually 1 or 2 stories tall, but spread wide, with rooms arranged around an open courtyard called the atrium. At the center of the atrium was a shallow pool, the impluvium, where rainwater fell through a square opening in the ceiling. The soft sound of dripping water echoed gently through the house, like nature whispering at every hour of the day. Sunlight slid through the opening, casting slow-moving patterns of gold across the floor. Around the atrium, you would find bedrooms, storage rooms, and the tablinum, where the head of the household kept documents, scrolls, and records. Further inside was a peristyle, a second courtyard ringed with columns, usually decorated with small gardens, statues, and potted plants. Birds sometimes perched on the ledges, and breezes from the inner garden carried the scent of flowers through the rooms. A domus was not noisy like the insula. It breathed quietly. Servants walked softly across the floors. Lamps flickered calmly. Meals simmered in the kitchen, filling the air with steady warmth. But whether in an insula or a domus, every Roman home shared one sacred center, the household shrine. Lars and Penates, the family guardians. In every home, rich or poor, stood a small shrine known as a lararium. This was where the Romans honored the Lars and Penates, the household gods who protected the family, the food, and the home itself. The shrine could be a painted niche in the wall, a tiny altar in a corner, or a decorated stand holding small clay figurines. Families offered wine, incense, or a small piece of bread at these shrines. Before meals, people paused to thank these spirits. Before journeys, they whispered prayers for safety. Children grew up with these rituals, watching their parents light lamps before the little altar. Even in the busiest homes, the shrine was a place of stillness, a reminder that life, however crowded or chaotic, had a sacred rhythm beneath it. Kitchens, courtyards, and rooftops. Roman kitchens, called culaini, were usually small and simple. Wealthy kitchens had built-in stoves and a variety of pots and pans. But in many insulae, cooking meant heating food over a small brazier. The smell of smoke, herbs, and boiling grains often drifted up through the stairways. Most cooking tools were made of clay, bronze, or iron. Jars of olive oil lined the shelves, along with spices, dried fruits, salted fish, and baskets of bread. In many homes, the kitchen felt like a warm heart, a place where life happened through scent and fire. Courtyards also played a quiet role in daily life. Families gathered there to talk, prepare vegetables, or let children play. Laundry hung across ropes, swaying gently in the sunlight. A courtyard was often the brightest part of a home. Rooftops were surprisingly important too. In many insulae, the roof was a shared space used for drying clothes, storing tools, or escaping the heat at night. On warm evenings, families sometimes ate dinner or rested under the open sky, watching the city lights flicker far below. Objects of daily living. If you walked through a Roman home, you'd see many simple objects that fill their daily routines. Items made with care, meant to be used again and again. Clay storage jars called amphories stood in corners, holding wine, oil, or grains. Small bronze lamps glowed softly in the evening, their flames fed by olive oil. Utensils, spoons, knives, ladles, were often made of bronze or bone. Ceramic bowls and plates, painted with simple designs, sat neatly on wooden shelves. Rooms were lit not by brightness, but by warmth. Lamps created pools of golden light, softening the shadows and making rooms feel safe and calm. Families sat together on wooden stools or low couches. Children played with toys made of clay, tiny animals, little carts, simple dolls. Scrolls of papyrus rested in niches for those who could read, filled with poetry, stories, or household accounts. Everything had a purpose. Everything had a place. And every object carried a trace of someone's hand, someone's routine, someone's life. Family spaces and quiet corners. Even in crowded insular rooms, families carved out small spaces to relax. A corner with a low table for meals. A small shelf for treasured items. A mat for sitting or resting. In wealthy homes, there were rooms dedicated to leisure. A triclinium for dining, where couches lined the room so people could recline as they ate. Quiet side rooms for reading or writing, and small bedrooms with gentle lamplight. But regardless of wealth, every Roman home had moments of calm. Early mornings when the house was still, evenings when lamps were lit and stories were told, nights when the cool air drifted softly through open windows. A home full of life. When we think of Rome, its monuments, its emperors, its armies, it is easy to forget the quiet places where real life happened. But inside these homes, noisy or peaceful, simple or grand, Romans loved, argued, cooked, washed, prayed, played, and dreamed. Homes were not just buildings. They were living worlds. They held the echoes of footsteps, the warmth of shared meals, the glow of small lamps, and the soft comfort of sleep. And as another Roman day began, the homes, whether humble insulae or spacious domus, slowly filled with the sounds of life rising again, ready for whatever the day would bring. As the Roman morning slowly unfolded, and the first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops and courtyards, the city began to fill with soft, familiar scents. Warm bread, crushed olives, fresh fruit, and the earthy aroma of clay ovens being lit. Breakfast in ancient Rome was not a feast, but a quiet, simple moment of nourishment before the day's work. If you imagine yourself as a Roman for a moment, waking up to the distant hum of the city, you would find that breakfast, or ientaculum, as they called it, was gentle, light, and unhurried, something to ease the body awake and settle the mind. What Romans ate for breakfast. For most Romans, breakfast was modest. A piece of panis, plain bread baked the night before, often dipped into a little olive oil or sprinkled with cheese, herbs, or honey if one could afford it. Sometimes there were a few olives, salty and rich, or a piece of fruit, figs, grapes, or apples, depending on the season. Children often ate whatever was left from the previous night's meal. For wealthier households, the morning might include small pastries, sweetened wine, nuts, or even cold leftovers from a feast. But even then, breakfast was never grand. The Romans saved their largest meals for later in the day. The purpose of breakfast was simple: a calm start, just enough energy to greet the morning. Street food versus home-cooked meals. In a city as lively as Rome, breakfast did not always happen at home. Many Romans grabbed a quick bite from street vendors who had already lit their fires before dawn. You could hear the soft crackle of frying pans and smell warm bread as vendors set their stalls along busy roads and near markets. Some sold small meat patties or warm chickpea cakes. Others offered bread dipped in wine or simple porridge scooped into clay bowls. For workers heading to the forum or craftsmen beginning their day's labor, these stalls were quick, affordable, and comforting. At home, especially in wealthier houses, the scene was calmer. Servants brought trays of bread, fruit, olives, or warm grain porridge. Families gathered briefly in the atrium or courtyard, eating quietly as sunlight filtered in through open roofs. Whether outdoors among the morning chatter or indoors within peaceful walls, breakfast carried the same gentle rhythm, preparing food without modern kitchens. It's easy to forget that Romans lived without stoves, refrigerators, or running water. And yet, their meals were full of flavor, made with patience and skill. In the kitchen, the culina, food was cooked over small hearths or portable braziers fueled by charcoal or wood. Clay pots simmered slowly, filling the air with soft bubbling sounds. Bread was baked not inside homes, but at public bakeries, where families brought their dough to be placed in large communal ovens. Porridge made from wheat or barley was a common morning dish. It cooked slowly in clay pots, thickened with honey or herbs. Bread was dipped into wine or water to soften it. Olives were crushed lightly to release their oils. Cheese was sliced or crumbled by hand. Everything took a little time, just enough to let the day truly begin. Fresh produce markets and morning vendors. By the time most Romans were ready to eat, the marketplaces were already full of life. Vendors arranged baskets of figs, pears, and grapes. Fishermen displayed their early catch. Farmers brought vegetables, onions, leeks, cabbages, carrots, still smelling of earth. The soft clatter of wooden crates, the call of sellers advertising their freshest produce, the gentle bargaining between neighbors, all created a rhythmic background to the morning meal. If you walked through a Roman market at dawn, you would see colors everywhere. Green herbs bundled neatly, the deep purple of ripe figs, the pale golden crust of freshly baked bread. People moved with purpose, but not haste. The morning hours felt calm, as if the city itself was still stretching awake. Water, wine, and morning drinks. Drinking water in ancient Rome was surprisingly safe, thanks to aqueducts that carried fresh water into fountains, cisterns, and public baths. Still, many Romans preferred to start their morning with wine diluted with water, a gentle drink, far from the strong wines we know today. This watered wine was smooth and calming, almost like a warm morning tea. Children drank water, or a mild honeyed mixture. Workers sometimes drank a simple barley beverage that provided quick energy. Wealthier Romans enjoyed warm milk or light herbal infusions made from mint, thyme, or fennel. Unlike today, caffeine was unknown. There was no coffee or tea. The morning energy came from bread, fruit, and fresh air, and perhaps a sip of sweetened wine to ease into the day. A quiet beginning to a busy city. Breakfast marked the moment when Rome fully came alive. Market stalls opened, workers stepped into the streets. Children began their chores and household routines unfolded. Yet within each home, whether a small apartment or a spacious villa, the first meal of the day was gentle. There was no rush, no loud sizzle of frying pans, no clatter of cups, just simple food, shared quietly, taking its time to welcome the morning. In that peaceful hour, Rome felt almost soft, a vast city wrapped in the simple comfort of bread, olives, and warm light. As the morning settled over Rome, the quiet warmth of dawn slowly gave way to the gentle rise of city life. The soft rustle of households waking up spread into something bigger, a hum, a rhythm, a pulse that only ancient Rome could make. Step outside any insula or domus, and the streets greeted you with a living tapestry of sound, scent, and motion, the noise and atmosphere of Roman streets. At first it was subtle, a vendor moving his cart, a donkey stepping onto the stone road, a distant shout from someone opening a shop. But within moments, the entire city seemed to exhale, and the streets came alive. Roman streets had a distinct music of their own. The clatter of wooden cart wheels rolling over uneven stones, the soft grunt of mules pulling heavy loads, the rhythmic calls of street vendors advertising their goods, the chatter of neighbors greeting each other, the echo of footsteps between stone walls. It wasn't chaotic, not yet. It was more like a city stretching, preparing for the long day ahead. If you imagine yourself walking through Rome in these early hours, you'd feel everything buzzing around you, but in a strangely calming, familiar way, as if each sound belonged exactly where it was. Market stalls, bread sellers, spice traders, fishmongers. As you walk closer to markets, the beating heart of Roman daily life, the air shifted again. Warm bread, crushed herbs, salt, fish, and smoke. Fresh figs split open on wooden boards. Everything had a scent. Bread sellers set out their baskets early, calling out panis calidus, fresh bread. Their loaves were still warm from public ovens. Spice traders arranged small bowls of powdered color, saffron, pepper, cumin, coriander. These stalls looked like miniature artwork, their bright spices glowing against muted cloth. Fishmongers shouted louder than anyone else, eager to sell their morning catch before the sun grew too hot. The smell of salt water, scales, and wet rope clung to their corner of the market. You would hear knives tapping against wooden blocks, fish being cleaned quickly with practiced hands. Every stall brought its own tiny world, its own chorus of sounds. Beggars, musicians, and entertainers. Rome's streets held every kind of person. Near temples and busy intersections, beggars sat quietly, some with children beside them. They stretched out their hands, hoping for a few coins, soft bread, or a warm gesture from passers-by. Not far off, musicians tuned lyres or pipes, filling the air with gentle notes. Some were skilled, others not so much. But music drifted everywhere, a soft background to the busy city. And entertainers, jugglers, storytellers, acrobats performed small acts to catch the eyes of crowds. Children gathered to watch, giggling whenever someone dropped a wooden ball or tumbled in the dust. Rome might have been vast and powerful, but moments like these reminded everyone that it was also deeply human. Garbage, sanitation, and daily smells. For all its beauty, Rome was not a clean city. Streets were swept, yes, but not constantly. Waste from homes often ended up in gutters. Vendors tossed scraps into piles. Fish markets left behind scales and bones. Animals dropped their own messy contributions. The morning air mixed pleasant scents with less pleasant ones. Fresh bread and olive smoke from braziers, herbs and spices, damp stone animals, garbage and sewage from street drains. It was a blend uniquely Roman, earthy, alive, imperfect, and real. Public workers attempted to keep streets passable. Water trickled through small drainage channels. Slaves swept debris to the side. But sanitation was an ongoing battle, especially in crowded districts. Still, somehow, Romans accepted it as part of life, part of the city's soul. city guards and patrols moving between crowds. Amid the clutter and the chatter, city guards, the vigiles, moved through the streets. They watched for thieves, pickpockets, or any signs of fire, which was one of the greatest dangers in Rome's tightly packed neighborhoods. Their presence added a sense of order. A guard reminding a vendor not to block the walkway, a patrol checking lanterns along shaded alleys, a subtle watchfulness as crowds thickened. Even as the market grew louder, even as the streets filled with movement, there was always someone ensuring things didn't slip into chaos. The vigiles weren't always respected, but they were always noticed. A city fully awake. By mid-morning, Rome had become a living, breathing organism. Vendors shouting, musicians playing, people bargaining, children running, smells swirling, guards patrolling. Every street had its own personality, noisy, fragrant, warm, imperfect, and every sound blended into what made Rome feel so alive. It wasn't peaceful in the usual sense, yet somehow, in the gentle rhythm of daily life, there was a soothing quality, predictable, familiar, steady, like the heartbeat of a world long gone, still echoing faintly across time. As the Roman morning settled into its steady rhythm, the city shifted from waking to working. The early soft noise of markets was soon joined by the deeper, purposeful sounds of an empire running itself. And though Roman life could be chaotic, the flow of daily work held its own gentle order. Jobs of men, builders, bakers, soldiers, scribes. For most men, work began shortly after sunrise. The empire needed constant movement. Stones cut, bread baked, letters written, roads repaired. Each man stepped into his trade like a piece of a vast, ancient machine. Builders were among the busiest. You could hear their world long before you reached it. The thud of hammers, the scrape of stone dragged into place, voices echoing off half-finished walls. Rome was always building. Homes, temples, aqueducts, roads. Dust clung to the air around them. But their work shaped the skeleton of the city. Bakers had risen long before dawn. They fed Rome. After all, public ovens glowed with heat as they slid loaves into the fire. By the time the rest of the city woke, the bakers were already deep into their routine. Flour dusting their arms, warm bread stacked in baskets, customers calling out for the freshest loaf. Soldiers moved with different energy. Even when not marching to war, Roman soldiers trained constantly. On mornings like these, their leather sandals tapped against the paving stones as they practiced drills, sharpened blades, or guarded important buildings. To Rome, a soldier wasn't just a job. It was an identity, a badge of discipline. Then there were scribes, seated at desks near shops or administration buildings. Their tools were simple, stylus, wax tablets, scrolls, ink, yet their work was essential. They wrote letters, kept accounts, recorded contracts, and copied messages for those who couldn't write. Their world was quieter, filled with scratching sounds and the rustle of papyrus. Different jobs, but each one letting Rome breathe, move, and thrive. Jobs of women, weaving, household management, shop work. For women, work followed its own rhythm. Inside homes, weaving was one of the most essential tasks. The soft clack of a loom was a familiar sound in Roman households. Women spun wool into thread, then thread into cloth, clothing, blankets, tunics, everything a family needed. Some sold their work in markets, their hands shaping the fabric of both home and economy. Household management was another full-time role. Women oversaw food storage, cooking, cleaning, budgeting, and caring for children. In wealthier houses, they supervised enslaved workers, ensuring the entire household ran with quiet efficiency. In smaller homes, they did everything themselves, from preparing meals to maintaining the small family shrine. Many women also worked in shops. They sold cloth, pottery, food, or simple goods. Some stood beside their husbands. Others ran stalls independently. In Rome, a woman behind a market counter was a common sight, arranging olives, measuring flour, greeting customers with steady confidence. Their work didn't echo the way builders did, nor did it glow like the bakers' ovens, but was constant, quiet, and vital. Slavery and labor realities. But to understand Roman work, we must acknowledge the truth beneath it. The empire rested heavily on enslaved labor. Enslaved men and women worked in nearly every field. Cooking, cleaning, farming, mining, blacksmithing, household tasks, education, construction. Some were treated harshly, working in dangerous mines or on vast estates. Others lived in households, performing daily chores under the watchful eyes of their masters. Some educated enslaved people became teachers, accountants, or assistants, respected for their skills, but never truly free. Their labor was everywhere. Yet their voices were rarely recorded. Rome's daily life, its clean streets, warm meals, well-run homes, existed partly because of their effort. It was a reality woven deeply into the city's rhythm. Workshops, blacksmiths, merchants. Across the city, workshops glowed with activity. Blacksmiths hammered metal into tools. Horseshoes, weapons, hinges. The steady ringing of iron striking iron echoed down alleyways, sharp, rhythmic, hypnotic. Potters shaped clay into jars, bowls, lamps. Their wheels spun slowly, the clay cool and smooth beneath their fingers. Finished pieces dried in sunlight before being sold in markets. Leather workers crafted sandals, belts, bags. Their shops smelled of treated hide and dye. Merchants bustled between stalls and customers. Some sold simple goods, dates, figs, bundles of herbs. Others traded luxury items, fine glass, perfumes, silks imported from across the empire. They bartered constantly, voices rising and falling like waves. Workshops filled nearly every corner of Rome. Each one added a tiny detail to the city's texture. A spark, a scent, a sound. Children learning trades from parents. Roman children learned early. A boy might sit beside his father in a workshop, watching how to cut stone or shape metal. He learned by doing, handing tools, fetching water, imitating movements. A girl learned beside her mother, weaving thread, grinding grain, preparing meals, managing the home shrine. With each task, she gained a sense of rhythm, a quiet understanding of how a household remained alive. Some children became apprentices. Others inherited shops. A few, especially in wealthy families, studied reading, writing, and philosophy. But for most, skills were passed hand to hand, generation to generation, like a gentle thread connecting family to family. Rome in motion. By midday, Rome was fully alive with work. Chimneys smoking, hammers striking, merchants haggling while spinning. Each person, each trade, contributed to a city that never truly slept. Even in its noise, there was something strangely soothing, the steady hum of routine, the comfort of predictable tasks, the timelessness of daily labor. A city made not only of stone and power, but of hands, thousands of hands, shaping life one quiet movement at a time. As the day warmed and sunlight climbed across the tiled roofs of Rome, another rhythm quietly unfolded inside homes, courtyards, and grand public buildings, the rhythm of staying clean in a world without soaps, faucets, or modern comforts. And yet, despite these limits, Romans cared deeply about hygiene. To them, cleanliness wasn't simply a habit. It was almost a way of honoring life itself. Public fountains and water basins. Across the city, water flowed in steady, soothing streams. Rome's aqueducts carried fresh water from distant hills, feeding public fountains, basins, and troughs scattered through every neighborhood. The sound of water trickling over stone was as familiar as birdsong, a cool, constant whisper in an otherwise noisy city. People gathered at these fountains all day long. Women filling jars for cooking, children splashing their hands, travelers rinsing dust from their faces, neighbors chatting as they waited their turn. The marble edges were worn smooth by years of touch. The water was clear, brisk, and refreshing, a gift of Roman engineering that made life cleaner, calmer, and easier. Bathing routines, oils, scrapers, towels. Without soap, Romans relied on olive oil to clean their skin. Thick, golden, and pleasantly fragrant, it softened dirt and sweat, making it easy to remove. The routine was slow, soothing, almost meditative. A person would pour a little oil over arms, chest, and legs, rub it gently into the skin until it glowed, scrape it off with a curved tool called a strigil, lifting away sweat, dust, and old oil, wipe clean with soft cloths or towels. The scraping sound, soft, rhythmic, echoed in bathhouses, courtyards, and gymnasiums. It was a familiar ritual, bringing a sense of relief after work, travel, or training. To finish, they washed with warm or cool water from basins or buckets. Even without soap, they felt fresh, smooth, lightly scented, and renewed. The role of bathhouses, thermae. But the true heart of Roman hygiene was the thermae, the public bathhouses. These weren't small chambers, but enormous complexes, some large enough to hold thousands. Inside you would find frigidarium, cool pools tepidarium, warm rooms caldarium, hot steam chambers, exercise areas, massage rooms, gardens, and reading spaces. People didn't go just to bathe. They went to relax, socialize, think, and breathe. The baths were warm, quiet, and calming, a refuge in the middle of the city's chaos. The air in the caldarium was thick with steam. Light filtered through high windows. Water shimmered. Conversations softened into gentle murmurs. Here, hygiene became a form of peace. Hair care, shaving, fragrances. Roman grooming extended beyond baths. Hair care was a daily ritual. Men often kept their hair short and neat. Women braided theirs into elegant coils and styles. Olive oil, smooth frizz, and added shine. Combs of bone would shape the hair into place. Shaving was done with bronze or iron razors, sharpened carefully. Some preferred smooth faces. Others shaped their beards. Barbershops buzzed with chatter as men sat in chairs, receiving trims, shaves, and fragrant oils. And then there were perfumes. Romans adored fragrance. They used rose, myrtle, lavender, cinnamon, frankincense, citrus peels. These oils clung softly to the skin, leaving behind a subtle warmth. Not strong, just gentle enough to feel civilized, composed, serene. Clothing maintenance and laundry rituals. Clean clothes mattered just as much as clean skin. Roman laundry was done not in homes, but in phalanaki, laundry workshops. Workers stomped on clothes in tubs of water mixed with clay, ash, and sometimes fermented liquids. It may sound unpleasant now, but the mixture lifted grease and dirt surprisingly well. Cleansed garments were rinsed, brush-dried, in open courtyards smoothed with heated tools lightly scented with herbs. At home, people shook out tunics, brushed off dust, and folded fabrics carefully. Clean linen felt cool against the skin, while tunics, when fresh, carried the faint smell of herbs and sunlight. Even the simplest laundry ritual added to Rome's rhythm. Another quiet way life renewed itself every day. A city shaped by water, oil, and intention. Hygiene in Rome wasn't effortless, but it was intentional. From the smallest clay basin to the grandest bathhouse, Romans found a way to stay clean, refreshed, and dignified, using the tools they had, and giving each moment its own quiet care. A splash of water, a drop of oil, a slow scrape of a strigil. A city breathing through simple rituals. Each one a reminder that even in an ancient world of stone and dust, people still sought comfort, calm, and balance. By the time the sun climbed to its highest point over Rome, the city began to soften. The morning rush faded, the clatter of carts slowed, and a warm stillness settled over the streets. Midday in Rome wasn't just a pause in the day. It was a shared exhale, a gentle retreat from the heat. Typical foods eaten at midday. Lunch, prandium, was simple and light for most people. Not a feast, not a ceremony, just a quiet moment to refuel before the long afternoon. Common foods included bread dipped in olive oil, cheese from goats or sheep olives, and pickled vegetables, cold leftovers from the previous night, fruits like figs, grapes, or apple, small cuts of salted fish. Workers gulped their meals quickly in shaded corners or workshop doorways. Wealthier families enjoyed something a bit calmer. Fruit platters, honeyed nuts, maybe some cold meat served on small plates. The food was simple, but in the heat of a Roman noon, it felt refreshing, grounding enough. The Roman siesta, meridiatio. After lunch came one of the most beloved parts of the Roman day. Meridiatio, the midday rest. The heat grew heavy, like a warm blanket draped across the city. Even the ever-busy markets grew quiet. Merchants leaned against pillars, eyes half closed. Children's laughter softened. Dogs curled in shaded doorways. People found cool places to lie down. In dim indoor rooms, under awnings on couches and triclinium, in shaded courtyards on rooftop terraces, catching stray breezes. This wasn't laziness. It was wisdom. Romans understood that the body needed rest in the middle of the day, especially in the Mediterranean sun. A short sleep or quiet moment preserved energy for the long evening ahead. Shops closing in the afternoon heat. As temperatures rose, shutters dropped over shop fronts. Bakers, butchers, and craftsmen closed their doors. Even the bustling forum began to empty. The soundscape of Rome shifted. Loud voices faded, replaced by the hum of cicadas, the faint rustle of fabric curtains, the distant trickle of public fountains, occasional footsteps on sun-warmed stone. It was one of the few moments when Rome felt truly still. Families relaxing, children playing indoors. Inside homes, families gathered in shaded rooms. Mothers prepared light meals or folded linen. Older men read scrolls or reclined on couches. Children played quiet games with clay figures, knucklebones, or small wooden toys to avoid the harsh sun outside. The air smelled faintly of cool water sprinkled on floors, olive oil lamps, trimmed earlier fresh bread from morning ovens, herbs drying on kitchen hooks. Even in the most modest insular apartments, there was a shared sense of pause, a rare hour where work, chores, and noise stepped aside. How heat shaped daily routines. Heat shaped Roman life in every way. It dictated. When people ate, when they worked, when they shopped, when they bathed, when the city slept, when it woke again. The midday lull wasn't a break in productivity. It was a rhythm, part of the natural flow of Roman days. People didn't fight against the heat. They moved with it, adjusting their pace like dancers following a familiar melody. Windows were opened strategically, rooms darkened with cloth, and courtyards misted to cool the air. Life slowed, softened, and settled. And then, as shadows lengthened and the sun lowered, Rome gently stirred again, ready for its long, vibrant evening. As the afternoon heat softened and the city began to breathe again, many Romans drifted toward the place where comfort, cleanliness, and companionship blended into one. The public baths, the thermae. These enormous, echoing complexes were far more than places to wash. They were sanctuaries where daily worries melted away in warm water, where conversations floated gently through the steam, and where Romans found a rare kind of peace. Visiting the baths was part ritual, part relaxation, part social gathering, a journey from heat to coolness, from dust to clarity, from noise to calm. Let's walk through that journey slowly, step by soothing step. The apoditerium, stepping out of the outside world. Your visit begins in the apoditerium, the changing chamber. You enter a broad hall lit by soft, golden lamplight. The air smells faintly of warm stone and fragrant oil. Niches carved into the walls hold folded tunics, sandals, and small bundles tied with rope. Attendants move quietly across the floor, helping visitors with oils, towels, or storing their belongings. The room is gentle, warm, but not hot. Calm echoes bounce off marble and plaster. You slip out of your outer garments, placing them into a wall niche. Your body already begins to relax. The outside world, the noise, the work, the heat, stays behind as you step into the next room. The tepidarium, entering a gentle warmth. The tepidarium greets you like a warm embrace. It is softly heated, the perfect middle ground between coolness and steam. Lamps flicker behind thin marble screens, casting warm shadows across the room. Visitors recline on curved benches, talking softly or simply letting their bodies loosen. The air smells of olive oil, lavender, and faint incense. You take a slow breath. Your muscles begin to loosen. The warmth seeps into your skin, comforting rather than overwhelming. The tepidarium is the doorway between normal life and the deep rest of the baths. You linger here, letting the day unravel. The caldarium, the heart of heat. From the gentle warmth, you step into the caldarium, the hottest room of the thermae. Instantly, a thick mist wraps around you. The steam rises from large bronze cauldrons placed over roaring furnaces under the floor. The air is heavy, fragrant, and deeply soothing. Light enters through high windows, dissolving into the haze and soft white beams. People sit on marble benches warmed by the hypocaust system. Stone floors heated from below by channels of fire. Sweat beads gently across your skin. Breathing becomes slow and heavy, like drifting through a cloud. Servants occasionally sprinkle scented water on the floor, releasing bursts of warm fragrance. Myrtle, mint, rosemary. Here, The heat draws out tiredness, stiffness, and everything the day left behind. You stay as long as your body wishes, resting in silence, letting the heat cleanse not just your skin, but your thoughts. The Strigil ritual, cleansing with olive oil. Before leaving the caldarium, an attendant offers a small amount of olive oil, thick, smooth, golden. You rub it into your skin. It softens every pore, making the body feel warm, luminous, and alive. Then comes a familiar sound, the gentle scrape of the Strigil. A curved bronze tool glides across your arms, shoulders, legs, removing oil, sweat, dust, and the residue of the day. The sensation is pleasant, refreshing, almost hypnotic. You feel clean in a way that is both ancient and deeply human. Romans believed this cleansing wasn't just physical. It released heaviness, a reset for body and mind. The frigidarium, a calm, cooling pool. After the heat comes the final step, the frigidarium, the cold room. You step into a large hall with a still, shimmering pool of cool water. The air is fresh and quiet. The shock of cold against warm skin is invigorating, but soothing at the same time. Some visitors dip slowly, letting the coolness wrap around them. Others stand at the edge, splashing water over their faces and arms. The frigidarium closes a ritual, sealing in the warmth, tightening the skin, calming the mind. You feel renewed, reset, light, beyond cleanliness, a place of community. But the baths were not only about cleansing. They were Rome's living rooms. In the warm social halls, you might see friends sharing soft conversations, old men debating philosophy, athletes discussing the day's competitions, merchants exchanging news, readers relaxing in garden peristyles, musicians practicing gentle melodies. In quiet corners, people receive massages with fragrant oils, myrtle, rose, vanilla, or cinnamon. Barbers trim beards, combed hair, and polished skin with smooth cloth. Even doctors visited the baths, recommending routines for health and balance. The baths were open to nearly everyone, rich or poor, citizen or visitor, and for a small fee, you could spend hours resting, thinking, or simply drifting through warm rooms. Architecture of calm. Roman bathhouses were masterpieces of design, echoing vaulted ceilings, mosaic floors of dolphins, vines, and waves, marble pillars, sunlit courtyards, shaded gardens with fountains, quiet reading rooms, warm spaces where time seemed to slow. The very layout encouraged peace. Every room flowed into the next, easing the body through warmth, then heat, then coolness, a rhythm that felt ancient and natural. The soul of Roman life. For many Romans, the baths were the most peaceful part of the day. People arrived dusty, tired, and burdened. They left glowing, refreshed, calm. The thermae were not just buildings. They were symbols of Roman daily life, where cleanliness and community intertwined. A place where strangers became friends, where arguments softened into discussions, where the body was cared for and the mind was gently reset. Even emperors loved the baths. Some built enormous complexes as gifts to the people, places where anyone, regardless of wealth, could find warmth, comfort, and calm. A slow walk back into the evening. As the sun lowered and lamps were lit in long halls, visitors slowly left the baths. Skin warm, muscles soft, minds unburdened. Outside, Rome buzzed again, music, chatter, footsteps, merchants. But something inside you remained tranquil. You had walked through heat, steam, oil, and water, through ancient rituals of cleansing and renewal, emerging clearer, lighter, and soothed. For Romans, this feeling was daily life, a rhythm of cleansing both the body and the spirit, a ritual of peace in the heart of a bustling city. And as evening descended, Rome glowed gently, carrying the warmth of the baths into the night. As the day moved gently forward in ancient Rome, faith was never far from anyone's thoughts. Religion wasn't a separate part of life. It was woven into every routine, every room, every breath of the city. A Roman didn't wait for special days to think of the gods. The divine was everywhere, on the street corner, in the kitchen, above the hearth, at the entrance of every home. And so, ordinary Romans lived with quiet awareness that unseen eyes were always watching, guiding, and listening. Let's step into that slow, sacred rhythm, White heavy checkmark small offerings at household shrines. Inside almost every home, from the smallest insular room to the grandest villa, there was a small shrine called a lararium. It sat in a corner or stood inside a niche, decorated with simple clay figurines or painted images of the Lars and Penates, the protective spirits of the house and the family. Each morning, someone in the family, often the mother, sometimes the eldest son, would pause here. A small gesture, a pinch of flour, a drop of wine, a fig or a piece of bread, a whispered blessing. It lasted only a few moments, but it grounded the family for the day ahead. A quiet promise to live with respect and gratitude. White heavy checkmark visiting temples, praying, lighting incense. As people moved through the city, to the market, to work, or to visit friends, they often stopped by local temples. Some temples were enormous, rising above the forum. Others were small, tucked between shops. A citizen might step inside for a quick prayer. A hand placed gently on a cold marble altar. A small coin offered. A curl of incense drifting upward like a message to the sky. Temples were places of awe, but also places of comfort. A Roman might pray for health, good harvest, safe travel, or simply clarity of mind. White heavy checkmark superstitions, omens, and fortune tellers. In between these formal rituals lived the world of superstition, the everyday kind that shaped how Romans walked, ate, spoke, and decided. They watched birds in the sky for omens. They avoided unlucky days. They whispered protective charms over children. They feared curses and wore amulets to ward off the evil eye. Fortune tellers worked near markets and crossroads. Some read the stars. Others cast stones or interpreted dreams. People would stop on their way to work, asking for guidance about love, money, or family matters. Even the most rational Roman, even philosopher, would hesitate if they sensed a bad omen in the air. White heavy checkmark gods of the home versus gods of the city. The Roman world was filled with gods, each one with a role. Household gods protected kitchens, doors, berths, and meals. City god protected Rome itself, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Minerva. At home, religion felt warm and intimate. In the city, it felt powerful, official, and awe-inspiring. A person honored both, one with whispered offerings, the other in grand ceremonies. White heavy checkmark festival-specific daily rituals. Throughout the year, the calendar was full of festivals, days when the city transformed. During the Parentalia, families visited graves and honored ancestors with flowers and offerings. During the Saturnalia, people exchanged gifts, lit candles, and let go of daily order. During Lupercalia, young men ran through the streets with strips of hide, bringing blessings of fertility. During the Vulcanalia, people threw small fish into fires to protect themselves from summer blazes. Each festival reshaped daily life. Special foods, special prayers, special rules. These rituals reminded Romans of their place in a cosmic order far greater than themselves. Religion wasn't a distant idea for the Romans. It was as close as a kitchen fire, as quiet as a whispered prayer at dawn, as comforting as incense drifting in the air. Every offering, every omen, every festival helped them feel protected, connected, part of a world watched over by divine forces. In the calm of those small rituals, Romans found meaning, rhythm, and peace. In ancient Rome, childhood was a gentle blend of discipline, routine, and simple joys. Though life could be demanding, there was a softness to the way families taught their children. A steady guiding hand meant to shape them into responsible adults who could honor the gods, serve the household, and strengthen the city. But the path for every child was not the same. From the moment they learned to walk, boys and girls stepped onto different roads. Roads shaped by tradition, expectation, and the quiet rhythm of Roman life. Let's wander through those early years. White heavy checkmark how boys and girls were raised differently. A Roman morning might begin with the sound of a child laughing in a courtyard, chasing a small wooden ball, or following a pet dog to the doorway. But behind this gentle scene lay very different expectations. Boys were raised to become citizens, future soldiers, farmers, politicians, or craftsmen. They were trained early in discipline, reading, numbers, and physical fitness. Girls, on the other hand, were taught the art of the household, weaving, cooking, managing servants, caring for younger siblings. They learned dignity, modesty, and the skills needed to anchor a family. And yet, both boys and girls grew up surrounded by warmth. Mothers guided daughters. Fathers guided sons. Grandparents, aunts, and uncles offered stories, advice, and little lessons about the world. White-heavy checkmark tutors, schoolrooms, reading and writing wax tablets. By the time boys reached the age of 7, many were sent to school or a private tutor known as a pedagogist, often an enslaved Greek man who watched over them like a guardian. Schoolrooms were simple spaces, sometimes outdoors, sometimes under shaded porticos. A stone bench, a wooden stool, and a teacher with a stick, using it not just for discipline but to point at words scratched on a board. Children practiced reading by tracing letters on wax tablets. Small wooden frames filled with soft wax, written on with a metal stylus. A single mistake could be smoothed out with the other end of the stylus, leaving the tablet ready for another lesson. They learned arithmetic with pebbles on counting boards. They listened to poetry, reciting the lines of Homer or Roman legends until the rhythm settled deep into their memory. For children of wealth, education expanded even further: rhetoric, philosophy, geometry. But for most, basic literacy was enough. Girls rarely attended these schools, though some wealthy families hired tutors to teach them reading or music at home. White-heavy checkmark outdoor games, toys, and childhood entertainment. Despite the responsibilities ahead, Roman children found many moments of joy. They played with clay dolls with movable arms, knucklebones similar to jacks, rolling hoops pushed with sticks, small wooden swords from mock battles, marbles made from stone or glass, toy chariots pulled with strings. In open fields and quiet courtyards, they raced, climbed trees, and played ball games. On feast days, they watched jugglers, dancers, and street performers. During festivals, children received toys, sweet treats, and small coins. Laughter drifted through Roman neighborhoods, just as it does today. White-heavy checkmark moral teachings in families. For Romans, raising children wasn't only about skills. It was about shaping character. Parents taught virtues through stories, proverbs, and example. Pietas, loyalty to family and gods. Gravitas, seriousness and self-control. Fides, trustworthiness. Industria, hard work. Disciplina, obedience and order. Children learned to greet elders respectfully, to help with chores, and to understand the roles they would one day fill. Some of the deepest moral lessons came during family dinners, where parents shared tales of Rome's heroes, reminding the children that greatness came from humility and discipline. White-heavy checkmark youth responsibilities. Even at a young age, Roman children carried responsibilities. Boys helped fathers in workshops, fields, or family businesses. Girls learned to spin wool, shape dough, store food, and prepare for future households. Both assisted with gathering water, sweeping courtyards, feeding animals, and helping elderly relatives. And as they grew older, around 12 or 13, childhood began to fade. A boy might receive his toga virilis, marking his entry into adulthood. A girl might begin preparing for marriage or managing larger parts of the home. Yet, even in these transitions, there was grace. Families gathered, celebrated, and passed on blessings, reminders that every child, no matter their path, carried the hopes of Rome within them. Childhood in ancient Rome may seem distant, but its quiet moments, the sound of a wax stylus scratching gently, a mother braiding her daughter's hair, children running through dusty streets laughing, feel close, familiar, almost timeless. In these small scenes, we see not just the beginnings of Roman citizens, but the everyday heartbeat of civilization. Young voices learning, growing, and stepping slowly into the world. As the sun dipped lower over ancient Rome and shadows stretched across tiled rooftops, the city slipped into a quieter rhythm, a soft drift toward evening. This was the time when homes began preparing for cena, the main meal of the day. Whether in a humble apartment or a grand villa, dinner was not just about food. It was about comfort, family, status, and the slow unwinding of a long day. Let's take a gentle walk into the kitchens, courtyards, and dining rooms of Rome and see how the evening meal came to life. White-heavy checkmarked the big meal of the day. Cena. For most Romans, breakfast was light and lunch simple, but cena was where the heart of daily life gathered. Some families ate together quietly, sharing bread and stews. Others hosted large gatherings with music, wine, and elaborate dishes. In poorer homes, Cena was straightforward. A stew of lentils or vegetables, bread warmed by the fire, maybe olives or cheese, if the day had been good. In wealthier homes, Cena could stretch for hours, moving through multiple courses, appetizers, main dishes, desserts, each carefully prepared and accompanied by wine mixed with water. But no matter the wealth or simplicity, Cena marked a moment of togetherness. It was the closing thread of the day. White heavy checkmarked servants preparing dishes for wealthy homes. In large Roman houses, the preparation for Cena began long before sunset. Inside the kitchen, a warm, smoky place called the culina, servants moved in a practiced rhythm. One chopped herbs on a wooden board. Another tended a pot over a clay oven. A third ground spices with mortar and pestle, filling the room with the scent of pepper, coriander, cumin, and sometimes imported cinnamon. These kitchens were small and dark compared to modern ones, ventless, smoky, and filled with the crackling sound of burning wood. But for Roman cooks, it was a familiar world. They roasted meats, simmered sauces, baked bread, and prepared fish brought fresh from the market. Wealthy families expected variety. A single evening meal might include stuffed dormice, roasted chicken, stewed vegetables, seasoned lentils, or fish drizzled with fermented fish sauce. Garum, the beloved Roman condiment. Servants worked quietly, knowing each dish had to be timed perfectly. Aroma drifted through the house, drawing family members into a slow anticipation. White heavy checkmark cooking tools, bread ovens, grinding grain. Roman kitchens held tools we'd still recognize today, and others long forgotten. Clay ovens warmed bread loaves, the crust crisp and smoky. Handheld grinders, called querns, turned grain into flour. Bronze pans sizzled with oil and chopped vegetables. Stone mortars crushed garlic, herbs, and spices. Iron skewers roasted meats over glowing embers. In poorer homes, families used shared ovens in the neighborhood, communal spaces where bread was baked for a small fee. The morning crowd gathered. There was a typical Roman scene. People chatting while dough baked, the smell drifting through narrow alleys. Grinding grain was often a daily task. Women or servants knelt beside querns and turned the heavy stones, slowly creating flour for the day's meals. It was steady, patient work, one of the quiet rhythms of ordinary life. White heavy checkmarked dining rooms, triclinium, and reclining. When the meal was ready, wealthier Romans gathered in a dining room called the triclinium. The name comes from the 3 couches arranged around a low table. Friends and family reclined on these couches, leaning on one elbow while servants carried in dishes. Reclining wasn't just comfort. It was a symbol of leisure. Only free Romans could recline. Enslaved people and children sat on stools or stood nearby. A soft murmur filled the room. People praising dishes, sharing stories, or simply enjoying the warmth of company. In modest homes, dinner looked different. Families sat upright on simple stools around wooden tables. The food was humble, but the feeling, that sense of ending the day together, was much the same. White heavy checkmarked dinner entertainment. In large villas, Cena wasn't only about eating. It was an evening of entertainment. Musicians played softly in the corner, lyres, flutes, gentle strings. Poets recited verses. Acrobats performed small routines. Sometimes, guests discussed philosophy or the latest news from the forum. Wine flowed through the evening, but always diluted, strong, undiluted wine was seen as barbaric. As conversation softened and laughter echoed to the triclinium, the night grew slow, warm, and gentle. In simpler homes, entertainment was quieter. A family might talk about their day. Children listened to stories about heroes and gods. The glow of oil lamps flickered across the walls, casting a peaceful light. By the time Cena ended, Rome was settling into night. Lamps flickered in windows. Streets grew still, and across the city, in crowded apartments and marble villas alike, people drifted into the ease of evening, nourished not just by food, but by companionship. In these small rituals, the grinding of grain, the warmth of bread, the glow of lamps, we glimpse another piece of Roman life. A simple, timeless truth that still comforts us today. Even in the busiest world, dinner is a moment to pause, breathe, and feel human again. As Rome settled into its daily rhythm, the lives of women unfolded mostly within the walls of home, a world shaped by soft routines, gentle rituals, and the steady hum of household duties. Though often hidden from the noise of the streets, these quiet rhythms were the backbone of Roman family life. And within them, a different kind of beauty existed. One made of patience, care, and small acts repeated day after day. Let's step gently into that world. White heavy checkmark morning grooming with oils and combs. The day for many Roman women began with light, delicate grooming. A small bronze mirror stood propped on a wooden table. Beside it, combs of bone or ivory, jars of fragrant oils, and little pots of powdered pigments. Women warmed a few drops of olive oil between their palms, smoothing it gently through their hair and across their face. Not for shine or vanity, but to soften the skin from the dry Mediterranean air. Combs glided through long strands, untangling the night's sleep. Some women added touches of color. Red ochre for the cheeks, a dusting of chalk or rice powder for the skin, a bit of kohl for the eyes. Everything was subtle, calm, meant to create a clean, composed presence. The quiet of these moments, the faint scrape of the comb, the softness of oil, set the tone for the day ahead. White heavy checkmark clothing, stola palla, hairpins, jewelry. Next came the clothing. A Roman woman's outfit had layers of meaning. The stola, a long pleated dress worn by married women, symbolizing dignity and matrimony. The palla, a draped shawl wrapped around shoulders when stepping outdoors. Hairpins and fibulae, made of bronze, silver, or even carved bone. Jewelry, simple beads for modest families, gold or gemstones for the wealthy. Hair itself was an art. Some women braided it into intricate coils. Others tied it into knots or twists. Wealthy women used slaves as hairdressers, nimble-fingered attendants who created complex styles inspired by empresses. But for most, the hairstyle was simple and practical, done with quiet efficiency before the duties of the day called. White heavy checkmark daily cleaning of the home, a Roman home, whether a small apartment or a spacious villa, required constant care. Women swept floors with straw brooms, wiped down clay lamps, dusted wooden furniture, and tidied sleeping areas. They arranged storage jars, refreshed water basins, and ensured that cooking spaces were clean and orderly. The rhythm of cleaning was gentle, steady, almost meditative. Clay pots clinked softly as they were moved. Fabric cushions were shaken in the courtyard. Sunlight filtered across tile floors as dust was swept into corners. Cleanliness wasn't just practical. It reflected the Roman ideal of order. A well-kept home was considered a reflection of a well-disciplined soul. White heavy checkmark weaving and textile work. Perhaps the most iconic task of Roman womanhood was weaving. In nearly every home stood a vertical loom, tall, wooden, and weighted with smooth stones. Women spent hours weaving cloth for tunics, blankets, or household use. The sound was soft but constant. The tap of the loom weights, the slide of the shuttle, the quiet rustle of wool or linen threads. Weaving wasn't just a duty. It was a symbol of virtue. Roman writers often praised women who managed their household with care and produced sturdy textiles with their own hands. Thread by thread, a woman shaped the fabric of her home, literally and metaphorically. White heavy checkmark quiet evening rituals. As sunset approached, the atmosphere shifted again. Women washed their faces and hands, sometimes using lightly scented water, rose, lavender, or myrtle. They changed into softer clothing. Lamps were lit, their glow warm and gentle against the gathering dark. Some spent the evening spinning wool, mending garments, or preparing small offerings at the household shrine. Others sat with children, telling stories of gods and heroes. Wealthier women read scrolls or listened to poetry recited in the garden. Even in simple homes, the evenings carried a sense of peace. The day's work was done. The home was clean and still. Shadows danced on the walls as the oil lamp flickered. It was a moment to breathe, to settle, to feel the quiet satisfaction of a day completed with care. In these small rituals, the gentle combing of hair, the steady rhythm of weaving, the glow of evening lamps, we glimpsed the heartbeat of Roman domestic life. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was calm, patient, and deeply human. A world where beauty lived in routine, where duty blended with comfort, and where each day ended with a simple, steady piece of home. As the afternoon sun settled over Rome and its shadows began to stretch across rooftops and temple walls, the city's movements continued. Steady, purposeful, and full of life. Traveling from one district to another was never quiet, never simple, but always rich with detail. And all around, Rome breathed like a living organism, flowing through narrow streets and open squares, guiding thousands of feet along its ancient paths. Let's walk through those streets together, slowly and calmly, white heavy checkmark navigating narrow streets. Rome was a maze, a beautiful, chaotic web of twisting alleys and stone-paved lanes. Many streets were so narrow that two people could barely walk side by side. Tall insulae, Rome's apartment buildings, rose overhead, their wooden balconies jutting out, sometimes close enough for neighbors to shake hands across the gap. Walking through these lanes meant moving carefully, sidestepping laundry hanging from windows, avoiding puddles from spilled water or dye, stepping aside to let others pass. Every turn carried new scents, warm bread from a bakery, sharp vinegar from a tavern, or smoke drifting from small household fires. The stones underfoot were smoothed by thousands of footsteps, each telling a story of everyday life. White heavy checkmark animal traffic, carts, vendors. Rome was alive with motion. Donkeys trotted past with baskets of fruit. Ox-drawn carts rumbled along, carrying marble pottery or sacks of grain. Street vendors pushed wooden trolleys filled with bread, figs, or roasted nuts. There were no traffic rules, only instincts and patience. Animals snorted, carts creaked, and vendors shouted over one another, calling out prices or waving goods to attract attention. You might hear the jingle of a mule's harness, the deep rumble of a delivery wagon, the rhythmic knock of a peddler's walking stick, the soft footsteps of children weaving through crowds. Traveling even a short distance required calm perseverance. White heavy checkmark couriers, officials, legionaries. Amid the everyday commotion, certain figures stood out. Couriers moved quickly, carrying messages sealed with wax, important letters, military orders, or political announcements. Their steps were purposeful, their expressions focused. City officials crossed the streets accompanied by assistants or scribes. They inspected shops, checked measurements at markets, or oversaw public works. And then there were legionaries, instantly recognizable in their polished armor. Even off duty, soldiers carried themselves with steady, commanding presence. People often stepped aside slightly as they passed, a silent acknowledgement of Rome's order and discipline. Their sandals struck the stone with distinct rhythm, echoing through the narrow lanes. White heavy checkmark noise, dust, and city chaos. Rome was never quiet. Sounds layered over one another like threads of a tapestry. Merchants haggling, animals braying, children laughing, wheels clattering, neighbors arguing from balconies, fountains splashing in distant courtyards. Dust rose into the air with each passing wagon. The sun warmed the stones until they gave off a gentle heat. The city smelled of life: bread, sweat, smoke, flowers, leather, spices. Even in the chaos, Rome had a charm, a bustling, ancient heartbeat. For someone walking through these streets, the noise became almost rhythmic, a reminder that the city itself was alive, busy, and full of stories. White heavy checkmark public notice boards and announcements. At major intersections or near public buildings, wooden boards displayed daily announcements. The Acta Diurna, the Roman equivalent of a newspaper. People paused to read. New laws, trial results, festival dates, gladiator show schedules, public notices from magistrates. Sometimes heralds read the announcement aloud, their voices rising above the noise, carrying news from a forum or proclamations from the Senate. Travelers walking by would stop briefly, listen, then continue their slow journey through the city's restless flow. Travel in ancient Rome wasn't peaceful, but it had a rhythm, a vibrant pulse of life moving through stone streets and sunlit alleys. Amid the noise and dust, there was something strangely comforting, the sense of being part of a vast, shared motion. Wherever you walked, the city walked with you. And as day drifted closer to evening, the streets glowed softly under the fading light, the hum of life settling into a calmer beat. As evening settled over Rome and the heat of the day began to soften, the city shifted into a different rhythm, slower in some places, lively in others. Lamps flickered to life behind open doorways, and the scent of warm food drifted through the streets. It was during these hours that small shops and taverns, the humble thermopolia, became the beating heart of Roman nightlife. Let's step inside one, quietly and gently. White heavy checkmark foods served in taverns, thermopolia. Thermopolia were everyday eateries, simple, warm, and always bustling. From the street, you'd see a long stone counter with round holes set into it, each holding clay pots of steaming food. Inside those pots were the flavors of ordinary Roman life: lentil stews, spiced wine sauces, olives and salted fish, roasted vegetables, barley porridge, small cuts of meat simmered in herbs. Some dishes were humble and filling. Others carried the scent of garlic, pepper, or fennel, simple but comforting. Workers, travelers, and people who didn't have a home kitchen relied on these small shops for their meals. You could feel the warmth of the pots even from the doorway. White heavy checkmark wine culture and drinking etiquette. Wine was everywhere in Rome, but it wasn't drunk the way we imagine today. Roman wine was strong, so strong that drinking it unmixed was considered almost barbaric. Tavern keepers would carefully dilute it with warm or cool water, depending on the season. Wine carried meaning. Mixed light for daytime. Mixed stronger for evenings. Mixed sweet with honey for special nights. People drank slowly, talking between sips, holding small clay cups in both hands to warm them. Etiquette mattered. Drinking too quickly was frowned upon, and drunkenness was disapproved, at least publicly. In dim taverns, wine became a companion to conversation. White heavy checkmark meeting friends, sharing news. As night fell, people gathered, workers ending long shifts, merchants returning from a forum, travelers looking for warmth, neighbors meeting after a day apart. The stone benches filled with quiet chatter. Friends shared pieces of bread, dipped into the same bowls, passed cups along the table. You'd hear soft laughter, murmurs of gossip, distant arguments about politics, or stories from the latest gladiator fights. News spread quickly here. Every tavern had its storytellers. For many Romans, this was the calmest part of the day. White heavy checkmark night workers, cooks, entertainers. Behind the counter, cooks moved with practiced ease, stirring pots, slicing bread, wiping counters smooth. Their hands were quick but gentle, their faces glowing from the heat of the hearth. Outside, night workers drifted along the streets, lamplighters tending flames, guards patrolling corners, bakers beginning their long night shifts, entertainers tuning small instruments. Some musicians played soft melodies near the tavern entrance, a flute, a lyre, or simple wooden pipes. Their tunes mingled with the murmur of voices and the clink of pottery cups. These sounds wrapped the night in a quiet, comforting rhythm. White heavy checkmark atmosphere of Roman nightlife. Rome at night was different, not silent, but softer. The lamps cast warm, golden halos on the walls. The smell of stew and baked bread lingered in the air. Street shadows moved slowly as people passed by. Inside the tavern, everything felt close and familiar. Gentle warmth, flickering light, simple food, shared stories. You could sit for hours, letting the world slow down, listening to voices rise and fall like a tide. The city outside might be noisy or chaotic, but inside the thermopolium, there was a small pocket of peace, a place where time softened. And as the night deepened, cups emptied, lamps dimmed, and people drifted home, carrying the last warmth of the tavern with them. In the long stretch of Roman day, there always came a moment, sometime between work and sleep, when life slowed down and people sought small pleasures to lift their spirits. Entertainment in ancient Rome wasn't only grand or loud. Often, it was simple, warm, and woven gently into daily life. Tonight, let's drift through those quiet moments of leisure. White heavy checkmark gladiator games, soft, sleep-friendly version, no gore. While the famous gladiator games are often imagined as fierce and dramatic, many Romans experienced them differently, as large communal gatherings full of music, cheering, and ceremony. On peaceful afternoons, families would enter amphitheaters with baskets of bread and fruit, settling on the stone seats beneath the bright sky. Before any contest began, there were long processions, musicians playing trumpets, performers dancing, trainers walking calmly beside their students. These moments felt more like festivals than combat. For many Romans, the games were less about violence and more about spectacle, honor, and the shared excitement of being together in a grand space. The anticipation, the music, the crowd. Those were the parts people remembered. White heavy checkmark theater, mimes, storytelling. In the evenings, the theater came alive with soft lantern light. Wooden stages creaked gently as actors in masks stepped forward, their voices rising into the open air. Comedies filled with clever jokes. Gentle dramas about love and family. Mimes performing silent stories with exaggerated gestures. Traveling storytellers spinning old myths to smiling children. People sat close together, wrapped in cloaks as the night breeze brushed past. Sometimes the audience watched in stillness. Other times laughter rippled like waves through the crowd. Storytelling was especially beloved, a way to revisit familiar tales, the same way we revisit comforting bedtime stories today. White heavy checkmark board games, dice music. Not all entertainment required crowds. Many Romans enjoyed quiet games at home or in small taverns. You might hear the soft clatter of bone dice, someone whispering a hopeful guess, or the gentle scrape of game pieces being moved across wooden boards. Popular games like Ludus Trunculorum, a bit like ancient chess, kept many minds sharp and focused. Music drifted through the city at unexpected times. Someone playing a lyre beside an open window. A friend tapping rhythms on a hand drum. Soft flute melodies echoing through a courtyard. Nothing loud, nothing harsh. Just gentle sounds folding into the evening air. White heavy checkmark festivals and public gatherings. Throughout the year, the Romans celebrated a long calendar of festivals. Bright, joyful, filled with color. But each had moments of quiet beauty. 2. Lanterns glowing at dusk, soft prayers whispered at temples, friends exchanging small treats or flowers. On festival days, people walked slowly through decorated streets, wearing fresh wreaths or clean tunics, enjoying performances, music, and shared meals. It wasn't only a celebration. It was a pause from life's demands, a moment to breathe and reconnect. White heavy checkmark pets and animals in Roman homes. In the quiet corners of Roman homes lived gentle companions. Small, fluffy dogs curled beside the hearth. Cats stretching lazily in warm sunlit patches. Songbirds in tiny wicker cages. Even pet monkeys in wealthier houses. Children played with puppies in courtyards, laughing softly, while older family members fed breadcrumbs to birds. Animals brought warmth and softness into daily life. A reminder that even in a bustling city, moment of comfort could be found in small paws and gentle chirps. As night deepened, Rome settled into a calm hush. Music faded. Dice were put away. Theater lights dimmed. Pets curled up at their owners' feet, and families drifted back into their homes. Entertainment wasn't just distraction. It was connection, joy, and the simple pleasure of being alive in a shared world. In ancient Rome, health was a quiet blend of knowledge, nature, and hope. People lived close to the rhythms of the seasons, and when illness touched a household, they turned to soft rituals, warm herbs, and the steady hands of healers who had learned their craft through generations. Tonight, let's drift gently through the way Romans care for themselves and the ones they loved. White heavy checkmark Roman doctors, herbs, and superstition. Roman medicine lived somewhere between science and faith. Doctors, called medici, could be found in busy marketplaces or attached to wealthy families. Some studied Greek medical texts, carrying small bronze instruments and jars of herbs. Others relied on instinct, old advice, and the comfort of familiar remedies. They believed the body was guided by balance, warmth and coolness, moisture and dryness, and that restoring harmony was the key to healing. Herbs were their quiet helpers. Rosemary to warm the chest, thyme to soothe breathing, chamomile for calm and rest, fennel for digestion. Beside these, superstition walked softly in the background. A charm hung over a bed, a whispered prayer to Apollo or Asclepius, or a ribbon tied around the wrist for protection. These small gestures brought comfort, especially at night. White heavy checkmark common household treatments. Before calling a doctor, Families often tried simple remedies at home. In a Roman kitchen, healing started with warmth and gentleness. Warm compresses made from wool soaked in olive oil. Herbal teas brewed slowly over low flames. Honey mixed with herbs to soothe the throat. Lavender water brushed lightly on the forehead. Mothers and grandmothers were keepers of this quiet knowledge. A warm cloth placed on a child's back, a soothing balm rubbed into the skin, or the smell of herbs hanging near the hearth. These were the small comforts Romans trusted. White heavy checkmarked bathing as medicine. For the Romans, water wasn't just cleansing, it was healing. Doctors often recommended warm baths to loosen tightness, cool baths to refresh the mind, scented baths with herbs to ease tension, oil massages to restore strength. The gentle rise of steam, the glow of oil lamps reflecting on the water, and the slow rhythm of breathing created a space where the body could settle and the mind could quiet down. Some bathhouses even had separate rooms for rest, where visitors reclined on warm stone benches and drifted into calm drowsiness. White heavy checkmarked dreams and healing rituals. Healing sometimes came through dreams. At temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine, people practiced incubation, sleeping in sacred chambers, hoping for a dream that revealed a cure or brought reassurance. Priests interpreted these dreams gently, offering advice or simple rituals. Washing in sacred springs, lighting incense, touching holy statues, carrying blessed leaves or ribbons. It was less about strict medical treatment and more about peace, the kind that settles in the heart when someone believes they are being watched over. White heavy checkmarked midwives and childbirth practices. In Roman homes, the most respected healers were often midwives, called obstetrics. Their craft was ancient, passed quietly between women for centuries. Midwives guided mothers through childbirth, offering soothing words, warm oil massages, and herbal drinks for strength. They wrapped newborns carefully in soft cloths, checked their breathing, and placed them into their mother's arms with tenderness that crossed generations. After childbirth, the home filled with soft rituals, washing the baby in warm water, rubbing olive oil into their skin, laying protective charms near the cradle, offering thanks at the household shrine. It was a time of hushed voices, gentle footsteps, and deep gratitude. As the day faded in ancient Rome, lamps flickered beside resting bodies. Warm tea cooled on wooden tables. Someone whispered a prayer to the healing gods. Someone else watched over a sleeping child. And in the quiet of the night, the city breathed softly. Healing, in Rome, was not just medicine. It was care. It was patience. It was a simple comfort of being tended to with calm hands and hope. As daylight faded in ancient Rome, the city softened. Shadows stretched across the stone streets, and the noise of markets, workshops, and carts slowly melted into something quieter, something almost peaceful. Evening in Rome wasn't just the end of the day. It was a gentle unwinding of the city's breath. Let's drift through that calm transition together. White heavy checkmark lamps being lit. As the sky shifted from gold to deep blue, households prepared for nightfall by lighting their oil lamps. A small flame touched the wick, a soft crackle, and then warm, steady light spread across the room. Olive oil burned quietly inside bronze or clay lamps, filling homes with a gentle glow. The light wasn't bright, just enough to soften shadows and make each room feel warm and safe. Some families placed lamps in doorways, others in courtyards where the air was cool and fragrant. The flickering flame became a signal to slow down, breathe, and settle into the quiet. White heavy checkmarked narrow alleyways, growing quiet. The narrow streets, so lively during the day, slowly emptied. Vendors folded their stalls. Shopkeepers swept dust from their doorsteps. Children, who had been running barefoot through alleyways, were called home. The echoes of daytime faded into the soft patter of a few footsteps and the distant creak of a cart making its final trip. Somewhere, a dog barked once and then settled down. The city didn't sleep completely, but it rested like a great, living creature closing its eyes for a moment. White heavy checkmarked families gathering. Inside Roman homes, families gathered together for the last slow moments of the day. Some sat in small courtyards where vines curled along the walls. Others settled near the hearth, letting the warmth ease the body after the day's work. Children shared little stories from their games or lessons. Women finished the last stitches of weaving. Men spoke softly about work, neighbors, or the next day's plans. This was one of the few times when everyone paused, truly paused, to be together. In simple homes or grand villas, the feeling was the same, the gentle closeness of evening. White heavy checkmarked music, drifting through streets. As darkness deepened, a soft soundtrack began to float through Rome. A flute's thin, sweet notes from a nearby home. A lyre being tuned in a tavern. Someone humming a familiar tune while closing shop. Music was an evening companion. It drifted lightly between buildings, mixing with the scent of bread cooling, wine being poured and lamps burning. Some families sang lullabies to their children. Others let the distant melodies lull them into quiet conversation. The city felt calmer, softer, almost dreamlike. White heavy checkmark washing before sleep. Before resting, many Romans performed small cleansing rituals, a gentle echo of the day's beginning. They rinsed their hands and faces with cool water from a small bowl. Sometimes, they rubbed a touch of olive oil onto dry skin. Children were washed with cloths dipped in warm water. Feet were cleaned to remove dust from the streets. These simple moments of care helped release the heaviness of the day. The feeling of cool water on tired skin. The scent of oil. The quiet satisfaction of being refreshed. It was more than hygiene. It was closure. A way of telling the body, the work is done, you can rest now. As lamps dimmed and families drifted to their beds, Rome settled into its nighttime rhythm. A soft hush beneath the stars, the last whispers of the day fading into stillness. And in that calm, gentle quiet, the city waited for dawn to begin the cycle all over again. When night finally settled over ancient Rome, the city transformed. The heat of the day faded. The crowds dispersed, and the endless movement of carts and footsteps slowly dissolved into quiet. Rome at night wasn't silent, exactly, but it breathed differently, more softly, more slowly, like a giant easing itself to rest. Let's drift through that nighttime world together. White heavy checkmark how Rome looked after dark. Imagine the city now, wrapped in a deep, velvety darkness. Most homes had only a few small lamps burning. Shadows moved gently along walls of stone and plaster. Rooftops cooled under the open sky, holding the day's warmth a little longer before finally releasing it. The great public buildings, temples, basilicas, bathhouses loomed like quiet silhouettes. Their marble columns glowed faintly in the moonlight, almost silver. The air grew still, carrying the soft smells of cooling earth, distant hard smoke, and fading perfume. Rome felt both vast and intimate in the dark, a little quieter, a little kinder. White heavy checkmark night watchmen, risks, and silence. Not everyone slept. Across the city, night watchmen, the vigiles, walked slowly through the streets. Their footsteps echoed softly, their torches flickering in the night air. They watched for fires, the greatest fear of a crowded city of wooden beams and oil lamps. They listened for trouble, for shouts in the distance, for any sign of danger. Night in ancient Rome carried certain risks. Alleys were darker than daytime shadows. Travelers moved cautiously, and people rarely went out unless they needed to. But the vigila's presence brought comfort, a reminder that even in the quietest hours, someone watched over the sleeping city. And for most Romans, night was a time to stay indoors, close the shutters, and breathe a little easier. White heavy checkmarked people sharing beds, sleeping arrangements, inside homes, from crowded insulae to spacious villas. People settled into their sleeping spaces. Beds were simple wooden frames with ropes woven across, covered by straw-filled mattresses. Families in small apartments often shared a single room. Parents on one side, children on the other, siblings curled together, or even several people sharing a larger bed for warmth. In grander homes, couples had separate bedrooms, elegant rooms with painted walls, wooden chests, and soft blankets woven from wool or linen. Some Romans slept on couches or mats placed on the floor. Others preferred the rooftops on summer nights, letting the cooler air drift over them as they fell asleep beneath the stars. Wherever they lay, the goal was the same, to let the day melt away. White heavy checkmark rain, torches, moonlight over rooftops. On clear nights, The moonlit rooftops shimmered like pale stone waves. You could hear the distant flutter of birds nesting under the tiles, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, a soft conversation drifting from an open window. When it rained, the city sang a different song, drops pattering on clay tiles, water rushing through gutters, the earthy scent of wet stone rising into the air. Torches flickered along the main streets, their flames bending gently in the breeze, their golden glow reflected on wet pavement, turning the streets into quiet rivers of amber light. There was something calming, almost timeless, about Rome at night, a softness that didn't exist during the day. White heavy checkmark gentle ending reflection of a full Roman day. And so, in the hush of the Roman night, the city rested, the market slept, the bathhouses cooled, families whispered their last thoughts of the day. Lamps dimmed one by one, until only a faint glow remained behind shuttered windows. Rome, powerful, crowded, noisy Rome, finally paused. As the moon drifted across the sky and the stars shimmered above ancient rooftops, the city entered its deepest quiet, a quiet that wrapped around everyone, bricklayers and bakers, mothers and children, merchants and scholars, a quiet that belonged to the whole world. And in those peaceful hours before dawn, Rome dreamed of sunlight on marble, of crowded markets and warm bread, of laughter, work, worship, and life. Tomorrow, the city would rise again, full of sound, movement, and color. But for now, in the gentle dark, everything was simple, still, calm, a perfect place to drift into sleep.